Hi, everyone. This is Loren Baker with Search Engine Journal, and today I'm privileged to have Lidia Infante on the show. Lydia, you were just at MozCon
I was.
over
It
the
was a
week, weren't you?
blast. It was incredible.
Nice, nice. And you're at Sanity now. So, welcome to the SEJ Show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to have the opportunity to nerd out with you about all stuff headless SEO and just yeah.
Nice, nice. So before we get started talking about headless SEO, because I'm really interested in this, has been a trend for a while, especially headless e-commerce, and then everything that has to do with that. How about if you take a moment to kind of introduce yourself, talk about your background to our audience, so they get a chance to know you better.
Yes, I am terrible at introducing myself and considering I've done quite a fair bit of podcasts. I should have nailed a pitch, but I haven't. So bear with me. My name is Lidia. I was born in Barcelona. I've been in SEO for about 8 years now, and next week it's going to be on Monday next week. It's going to be my 10-year anniversary in the marketing industry, which is wild to me. Because I'm 29, so I started when I was 19, um, and then 2 years after that I got into SEO. I was getting my degree in psychology. I've got a bachelor of science in psychology, and I just wanted a quick night summer job like pouring pints in some pub or whatever. So I went, sending CVs around, and I went to my favorite pub, and it was closed. And it was supposed to be open, and I was very annoyed with that. So I crumbled my CV into a little ball, a paper ball, and I threw it. I threw it into the pub through the window, and I did not expect to be called for that job at all. So the next day, I have an email from their head of communications. It was a chain of pubs that was linked to a pretty big real estate chain for hotels and stuff in Ibiza. So it was bigger than just the pub that I knew. And she's like, "Oh, I see your background in psychology. I would love to have you for an interview for a position that I've got in the comms and PR department." So I showed up for the interview. It's one of my first jobs ever. And this lady has my crumpled CV just flattened on the table, the actual paper that I threw through a window. Um, and we started talking about ideas and PR and events and communication and marketing. And I got incredibly excited. And she told me that her father was a professor of marketing in a psychology university, which is why she thought that I would be a very good fit for the role because of the link of psychology and marketing, which at the time I did not appreciate. I thought I was going to
Right.
be a neuroscientist, I was going to be researching brains. And here we are talking headless SEO instead. Um, so yeah, that's how it started. And the moment that I got into marketing, I started taking some responsibilities on digital and being able to see the numbers move depending on what I did is absolutely addictive. So I started on social media and PR and seeing our brand awareness shoot through the roof. The chain of pubs was getting full and full, and it was amazing. But then my job moved to Visa without me, and I had to find another job. I knew I was addicted to the rush of digital marketing, so I decided to move on to PPC, and I worked for an international e-commerce for clothing personalization that was really interesting for a couple of years. And I was working there with their international markets, managing all types of PPC budgets, which is a dark secret of mine, but yeah, it really has helped me in my career, and it's laid the foundations for what I do in international SEO, for keyword research, for topic analysis, and it's taught me to have the cultural awareness that you need to do international. So that's been really really an amazing experience. And while I was doing that, because of course I can't stand still for half a second, I decided to create a feminist website. I was like, oh, I'd like to say my stuff, talk shit about men online as one does. And I started building it and it got big. I am telling you, it got huge. We went from zero to 200,000 followers on Facebook in less than a year. We were national trending topic 3 times. I was on TV, I was on radio stations. Um, the stuff that I was writing and that our users were writing went viral. We went from like zero to almost a million page views a month from organic. And
Oh
this caught
wow.
the attention. Yeah, it was good. I think it's sad because it was like many years ago, but it might be the highlight of my career.
What's
Um,
what was the site?
Oh, I don't think I can say it because
Oh, okay.
firstly, I gave it away and it doesn't exist anymore. Secondly,
Ah,
it's an extremely rude name.
okay. I'll
This
follow
was
up with you
never a
offline.
professional endeavor. It means, can I say it? Can I swear on your podcast?
E- um, Mildly.
Then no,
Okay. All
right?
right. Okay. We'll get it offline then. Okay. So
Yeah. it was
so
it was
this.
literally never meant to be a professional endeavor. But one of our readers was the head of the editorial director at RBA, which is
Mhm.
Spain's biggest magazine publisher, um, with the likes of like National Geographic, right?
Oh wow.
Yes, yes. She was a huge fan of my work. She tweeted at me. She's like, "Oh, want to come over for a chat?" And I left that chat, their chief digital editor, and I think I was 22. Um, Shocking. I spent 2 years with the most imposter syndrome, the biggest case of imposter syndrome that the world has ever seen. But it was amazing, and I learned a lot about SEO for publishing, right? For publishing teams, for news outlets. I collaborated with a National Geographic team and like a very small tax project that we did ended up delivering 7 million monthly organic sessions. A very tiny tweak to our tags. It was
So you
it
got
was
hooked.
so good. Yes, I got absolutely hooked. But then, and I know I was completely spoiled. I I didn't know what I had at the time because I was like, oh, I have access to all of these subject matter experts. I have no problem creating and publishing content all the time, and I publish it and it ranks, and I've got brand awareness, so everyone's linking to us. This is too easy. So I decided to move on to SaaS. Because the business model, yeah, I know. I knew nothing, okay? I was, at this point, I was 24, all right? There were some questionable decisions being made. So yeah, I moved on to the SaaS business, and the business model was different, right? Because when you're working in publishing, not so much anymore. Now the industry has changed a lot, but essentially you're monetizing through ads. Then you monetize through affiliates, and then later on it came like the whole paywall stuff. But it was only about volume, and that was not fun. I felt like I had mastered it at the time. So I moved to a SaaS platform, a British company, but I was still working in Spain, and it required for me to be very strategic about cannibalization and positioning because we had 3 brands, and the search volume for our terms in the Spanish market was tiny, tiny. So every click mattered. Um, and that was, yeah, an interesting experience. After that, I decided that I wanted even more crazy. SaaS was not crazy enough for me. And I moved on to an agency in the UK called Rise at 7 to continue with my pattern of being absolutely bonkers. I moved to Sheffield, which is a tiny city in the UK in the north. It's cold and it's windy. It's very green and beautiful without ever having been there before. Like my first time in that city, I had all of my suitcases with me. I had a rental agreement signed. I had a cat that I flew from Barcelona and had to have a layover in Heathrow. Um, and yeah, I moved there. I thought the pandemic was over. Obviously, it wasn't. So I spent 4 months locked by myself in that studio apartment, um, which really meant I had to focus entirely on doing my job and SEO and owning my craft and talking to stakeholders, learning how to sit in meetings with CMOs and CEOs of publicly trading American household names, um, which I think removed any kind of like sensitivity or nerves of public speaking, which then led me to, yeah, do a lot of public speaking. I worked at ecommerce for a short while, enabling the teams to deliver good international SEO and content best practices across the board for 18 different websites. And all of the challenges that we were facing for localization and recycling content and being able to create the content once but then use it 1,000 times made me look into headless CMSs.
Hmm.
Um, and that made me run into this job offer at Sanity. And I was like, yes, this is what I want to do next. This is my next crazy adventure. So I joined Sanity last month.
Well, let's get into headless CMSs first. Then, what exactly is it, and how does it work?
Right. So right before this chat between you and me, I have been thinking, how on earth do I explain what a headless CMS is without saying it's the opposite of a traditional CMS, right? Like we do tend to define headless CMS in opposition to a traditional CMS, but the most important thing that I can say about it is that the content is separated from the presentation. When you are building your content on, let's say, WordPress, you've got your text editor and you're typing away, you're saying your things, you're talking about your product, you're talking about this subject. You press publish, and that content belongs to that URL and that URL alone. But when you're doing headless and when you're working with structured content, it's super different. So what you do is you identify your distinct entities. Wait, this is going to be crazy if I explain it like this. I'm going to use an example. Let's say I'm the e-commerce manager at Apple and I've got several iPhones, a few MacBooks, different products to sell, and a very nice brand to represent. If I am in a traditional CMS, I'm going to have to create a page for the iPhone 13, write the title, write the product description, a longer blurb, explain all of the characteristics of each iPhone. So we're talking um, display dimensions, we're talking storage solutions, color options, everything under the sun. Um, and then I write it, and then I write it for the next product, then I write it for the next product. And then if I want to build it in an app, I need to write it all again. And then if I want a mobile website, I need to edit it all again. But if I was doing this on a headless CMS, I would identify my entities. My entities is iPhone, iPhone type. We've got a type of iPhone. And these entities have some common characteristics to them. They've got a name, they've got a tagline, they've got a price, they've got a series of available colors, they've got a series of display sizes, um, processor power, yeah, everything under the sun, right? So I build this schema, an empty schema of content that says phone with space for all of these characteristics. And then I go onto it again and I say product name, iPhone 13, price, whatever, outrageous. A little blurb of content summary in here. These are all of my pictures of the iPhone. This is what the iPhone looks like. These are the dimensions, etc. And I do this for all of the products, for all of the iPhones, and I do this for all of the MacBooks, for everything. And it sits on like a database, like a little pool of content, an absolutely humongous Excel, right? A huge mental spreadsheet of my key entities and all their characteristics. And then I go on to my developers and I say, listen, I want to build a product page and I want the product page to follow this template: product name, tagline, prices. Because we're on desktop, I want a longer description, and then I'm going to provide the audience with five um, 5 images, and then I'm going to show the top 3 characteristics that people care most about: color, processor, and storage. And then if they click on view more, they can see all the other ones. And at the bottom, some related products and the option to compare. I tell my developers to build this template, this page, and with one click, they pull all of the content from this massive database that I have created onto the page for all of my products at the same time. So this produces a level of scale that you can have anywhere else. Then I go and I say, Well, do I want my mobile version to be different? So I go to my developers and say, my mobile version's gonna have, um, we're gonna remove the compare option at the bottom. We're gonna produce the summary instead of the whole description, and we're gonna use 3 pictures instead of 5. And they click, and it is deployed. I don't have to build every page. I create the content in a core database, a central source of truth, and then I deploy it following a template. So if anyone listening has worked on enterprise SEO, you know that working with SEO with templates for pages and optimizing templates is a really good way to scale your SEO efforts. Um, Essentially, what I'm trying to tell you is like this is the difference between headless CMS and coupled or traditional CMS. Um, the content sits here and the presentation sits here, and the presentation rules are pulling from the structured content that you have created. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, it does. And it also makes sense. One thing we were talking about before you jumped on was I was mentioning how I was working on a couple of different headless. I don't know if I should go into Gatsby. So I was working on a couple. I was working on a couple of projects that utilize Gatsby, and the first thing, and one of them utilizes WordPress built on WP Engine as its database that it's pulling everything from, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the WP Engine environment and I'm looking at the Gatsby front end, and they're not the same. There's things that are missing. There's things that obviously be part of a WordPress build, like self-referring canonical, right? And on Gatsby, the canonical set for a default page or whatever. And I noticed this on various different Gatsby builds. I actually had a couple of companies that had reached out to me asking for SEO help, and I saw that they were on Gatsby, and I looked in their canonicals. And if your canonicals are messed up, then Google may not even honor any other command on your site if your canonicals don't work, right? So I was a little bit shocked to see that, right? And then you were telling me a little bit previously how spoiled everyone's become using WordPress or CMSs that are built with SEO in mind, whereas with a headless environment, sometimes you have to build that from scratch. And so, can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And like before you start doing SEO with headless, you take so many steps ahead of that. Like you need to take a step back. What I was telling you with the example with Apple and do some content modeling, right? You need to
Mm-hmm.
understand what are your entities, phone, laptop, iPad, whatever, and what are the characteristics of those entities to then be able to build pages. But when you're building pages, at the I think my favorite moment in this process of doing headless SEO is the page build and the template build when you're designing how the content's going to be deployed to your different channels. Um, you take a step back, you think about the user experience, you think about the user intent, you build this beautiful request for your dev team. But if you haven't worked with headless before, you might take for granted that you're going to have a title and a meta description, that you're going to have canonicals at all, that you're going to have open graph data, that you're going to have space for hreflang, or that you're going to have, you know, robots, meta robot stacks.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to sit down and strategize how you want this to happen. So you tell your developers, I want for every page to have a space for a title and a meta description. I want every canonical to be self-referencing. What happens when you've got a parameterized URL? I want it to reference to the URL without parameters. I want this to be towards the trailing slash or non-trailing slash version, depending on where your content actually sits. But you need to be super explicit with what you need, and you need to talk to your devs to make sure that it happens. You're going to have to do some QA and some assurance. But a beautiful thing, in my opinion, is that you can integrate some validation rules into this process, right? So I could come in and say, um, I want all of my titles, meta titles, to be different from all of my H1s. So if a content editor inputs the same title and the same H1, it cannot be published. An error is going to pop up. I want all of my titles to be under 65 characters and all of my meta descriptions to be under 155. If it doesn't happen, like it can't go live, or I want to be respecting the hierarchy of headings, or no duplicate headings. That's all of the validation rules you can integrate. Because when you're working in a website that has several stakeholders and several people can publish on it, or even when you have user generated content, creating creating editorial experiences that are conducive to high quality SEO content is going to be one of your quickest wins.
Got you. Got you. And
And in there,
besides,
sorry, there's another
oh, go
thing that
ahead.
excites me so much about this.
Hmm.
Um, in there, you could integrate, for example, I haven't been product side for other headless CMSs, but I can tell you that Sanity is based on the Jamstack, which is a JavaScript API and schema stack. So you could potentially connect some sections of your website to an AI content generator, right? So you plug in a product with a product image with some concepts around the product, and you have this AI content generator that writes the meta description for you every time,
Got
right?
you.
Or you
Got
could
you.
you could upload an image and have a visual AI create a perfect alt text for you every time. So the possibilities of scale are huge. And don't even get me started on internationalization because that is what got me into headless SEO.
Before we get into internationalization, let's talk a little bit about performance and other benefits. So, do you find that most headless SEO or headless CMSs are quicker, or is it the opposite? Is that a misconception? What have you found with the projects that you've worked on and at Sanity?
So they have the ability to be quicker, but in order for you to make them quicker, you need to know how to, right? If you don't have the knowledge or the skill set to work with headless CMSs, you might find that creating new landing pages is a clunky process where you need to ask your developers every time you need to make a change. In that case, someone who's got experience in headless SEO, or what I would recommend is you need to talk to your developers for them to make you a template that you can fill out easily to be deploying landing pages or content. But maybe you meant quicker, as in web performance, or do you mean
Yeah,
quicker as in
with
content
web
velocity?
performance as well. Yeah,
Right.
with web
So
performance
you've
as
got
well.
full control about how stuff is deployed from scratch. You don't need to go into WordPress and add lines of code and make changes to the core of how WordPress works to be able to say, um, I want things to lazy load in this way or this other way. I'm going to impact core web vitals by changing the way that these different requests interact with each other. So yeah, definitely you have the chance to make it faster, but headless CMSs come also with a lot of ownership and responsibility over what you're
Mhm.
doing. You've got infinite potential of what you can do, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're a lot more likely to mess it up than you'd be with WordPress.
Yes, I've noticed that too, which scares me, right? Because right now it seems to be the trend, and I have
What, messing it up
had
or or
well,
moving to
yeah,
headless?
messing it up because I
Yeah.
have had the ability to talk to people that are looking at new CMS systems. They're not happy with what they're on for some reason or another, or maybe like a consultant has come in and said, "Oh, you have to go headless because it's faster for Google," which for some reason uh, Google Lighthouse and the ability to have scores have swayed C suites to make that decision. Oh, we have to have a bigger number. We have to get closer to 100. 30 is not good enough. 40 is not good enough, which isn't the case, right?
Yeah.
Your site speed is only as relevant as your competitive set when it comes to Google ranking at the end of the day. So
Yes.
if
Yes. Thank
if
you.
you're a
Let's plug for
20
gap
and you're on
analysis.
if you're on page 1 and you're number 3 and you're a 20 and everybody else is a 15, you're really in first place from a speed perspective. It's other things that you have to make
Yes.
better, right?
Yes. Yes. You're speaking my
So
language. I love that.
especially with e-commerce because there's no sites. I mean, most of what you typically find in an e-commerce environment is that the site is incredibly fast until you add on all of the tracking mechanisms to make an e-commerce deployment successful
Yeah.
when it comes
Yeah.
to
You
things
need
like
your,
upcharging and
yes.
this and that and yeah. So anyway, besides more, so my point that I'm trying to get to is I think there's a little bit of a misconception with headless. A lot of people out there, the conversations I'm having with people that are not tech SEOs, is they feel that just utilizing a headless, something called headless, means that it's automatically going to be faster, quicker, and a better experience. But you're saying that all of that has to be implemented from day one or from ground zero as you're
Yeah.
building that up in order to get that benefit, right?
Yeah.
What are some other SEO related I guess SEO related optimizations, not to be too um, that can be looked out for in a headless environment and when you're trying to choose a headless CMS solution?
So let me touch on a quick thing on web performance optimization before we move on to that, because I have a lot to say about that as well. Surprise, surprise. Um, when it comes to optimization for web performance, it your headless CMS can guide you a little bit more, and different headless CMS are going to have are going to facilitate for you to achieve amazing core web vitals in different ways. I don't know if I can say that, but one of the Google engineers that's working on Core Web Vitals actually has his personal website with Sanity, and he's got
Hmm.
like perfect Core Web Vitals scores, obviously, because that's his job. But Sanity offers out of the box perfect Core Web Vitals. That's like a marketing prompt. I'm not exactly sure how we make that work, but my developers have absolutely sworn that if you don't mess it up too badly, you can expect like amazing web performance with Sanity. But in terms of SEO and other stuff that you can do, um, I think the main pain point that Headless solves is content velocity, right? Not just because you have like all your content on one side and you can pull it in different ways in different pages, which is like, it's not a small feat. You also have your content team taking care of only one core source of truth instead of having to look at and update 30 pages every time the price of one product changes, right? Or if we want to change the tagline for the iPhone, we just change the tagline on our database and it's going to get pulled on all of its pages, no matter how many, right? You can create category pages in a million different ways, um, and you can integrate AI writing or accessibility improvements through different services and in different ways. So it really empowers creators when it comes to content velocity, which is one of the main pain points we see, and I have definitely experienced in the SEO industry, both in like traditional SEO and international SEO. The level of content velocity that you can achieve by working this way is absolutely huge.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
but also it
Besides,
fixes
yeah,
sorry, it
go
fixes
ahead.
also like tiny little problems in other ways, right? As I was telling you earlier, we've partnered with Shopify, and Shopify has notoriously should I can't say that. Oops, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
Notoriously like notoriously not amazing um, category pages, right? So with Sanity, you can pull up your all of your Shopify information, all of your Shopify modules, and say, I want to have, I want to be pulling in this product description in here or this category description in there, and you can make it as long as you want, as short as you want. Uh, Show it up here or essentially the world is your oyster, right? So you could overcome some different tech limitations by using headless.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that you could do that much utilizing Sanity and Shopify
Oh yeah, it is
at the
it's a
same time.
superstar combination.
Okay, cool. Where is that on the site? Is that Sanity Connect for Shopify?
It's sanity.io/Shopify.
Okay,
We are
easy enough.
struggling to get that page to rank. Shame on me. You're calling me out in public.
Easy enough. That's okay. There's lots of apps and development pages and stuff like that about Shopify on the site as well. Been there, done that. So interesting. Yeah, because one of my biggest Shopify pet peeves is the lack of customization, and then the lack of also, I mean, there's more customization on the PDP. They typically do better sometimes in the collection pages. So it looks like you've gotten a lot of
Yeah.
that out of the way with
Oh yeah.
new templates and everything else.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, if you want a free sanity plan, hit me up. I'll set you up with our good stuff.
Well, dude, can you offer that to the audience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll have the team draw up a special landing page for you all to be able to access it. But yeah, I can offer that. Can I send it to you later
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it
we'll
to
do
show
a
up online?
follow up.
Yeah.
We'll do a
If not,
follow up.
you can
That'll be fun.
always go to sanity.io/moscon, non-branded.
Oh, look, a little bit of a brand slash MozCon. I'll drop that. Why not?
All right, we'll make one for you though. We'll make one for
Okay.
Search Engine Journal.
So anyone who's on right now who would like to check out Sanity, you can go to sanity.io/MozCon, which I'm currently dropping in the comments. And then in the
Of course.
future, we'll do a standalone tracking page for SEJ for a free account or trial or whatever it may be. So we've talked about basically content velocity, the ability to scale content in pages. We've talked about platform specific templates and targeted pages, right? The ability to set up your core template that you're utilizing for desktop versus mobile and everything else from a responsive standpoint, just powering all of that off the database. We've talked about the improvements on overall performance, whether it be speed, etc., in a headless environment. And we've talked about the importance of working with your developers to make sure that there's a basic SEO needs are obviously integrated into. What's one other core benefit of utilizing a headless CMS system?
I think headless CMS. I've seen amazing websites of programmatic content made with headless CMS. One of our clients, I believe they're dangler.com. Um, no, it's another domain, but the name of the brand
Mhm.
is Dangler. They have an affiliate website that is incredibly good. They are pulling in from all of the Shopify merchants who are currently selling materials for fishing, right? So we're talking like rods and lines and bait. Um, they pull it all into their sanity implementation, and then they decide how this is going to be displayed across their pages. Again, they make a category page and all of the products are being pulled in. And what does the product listing page going to look like? What does the product category page going to look like? Um, they automate that. The main thing that they do that they work on manually is descriptions for the categories, but they've chosen a series of providers and they're just pulling in their stock, their prices, their images. Um, if I was to do a similar project, I would probably try and automate product descriptions with some GPT based AI. But it's just brilliant. You can, if you're smart and you're creative, and I really admire the work that they have done. You can absolutely do a lot with not a lot of resources. It's
Gotcha.
genuinely very impressive.
Are those feeds leading the user over to the third party to make the purchase, or is it all purchasable within the one
So
shopping
I
cart?
believe they are. Oh yeah, it's dangler.com.co.uk. I believe they're leading them to the merchant. No, actually, you can directly shop with them. That is so good. I
But it's being fulfilled by the merchant.
yes. Yeah, like they blow
Interesting.
me away all the time. We've got such amazing smart people doing incredible things with our platform.
Yeah, when I had Kevin Indig on here from Shopify, gosh, almost a year ago now, one of the big things that he had told me was that people tend to overlook Shopify's both its platform and its fulfillment components when producing stores. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you can have utilizing some Shopify merchants, you can have you can do a pickup in store for a Shopify merchant that utilizes Shopify's point of purchase to pick up something from another merchant. They'll send it to that store. And I was like, what? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. Or you can go through the process of maybe utilizing a third-party cart to make that purchase, which then gets sent to multiple different merchants and fulfilled separately, which is kind of interesting as well. I would wonder how that works from a customer service standpoint after you make the purchase to get emails from all these texts from all these different merchants or whatever, or if it's all sent at once and consolidated as a shipment utilizing their shop technology, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. How well does AI content typically rank? I have some questions that have come in. When AI content is utilized in a headless environment, how
I
well
would
does it
say
typically rank?
I would say never use AI for anything that's mission critical.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet. If you want to build thought leadership, it's not going to be written by AI. And this is like a theory of mine. The fact that AI works right now is because most of the text that it's pulling from and learning from has been created by humans. But if
Right.
we model this pool of learning for the AI with more and more AI produced content, it's not necessarily going to make more human looking, human sounding content for you. Um, AI content is a good way to shortcut and scale different aspects of your site when they're not mission critical. If they are mission critical, I think you need a human writer or at the very, very, very least a human editor. Um, I'm not sure if this is like something that Google has officially said, but I'm sure that they can definitely figure out whether something has been written by AI or not. It's technically something that they don't recommend, and it's gonna miss. It's gonna lose any tone of voice and any uniqueness to your brand and your person when you're using it like that.
Yeah, I think in terms of I don't know, the term AI is thrown around almost as much as headless is, but I think from an AI perspective, where I see it as like tools like Phrase
Yeah,
and other like editorial template oriented tools, right?
yeah,
Hey, let's look at the competitive set and see, how this term is being used,
yeah.
make recommendations for H1s, titles, things like that, H2s, outline, and then have someone write around
Yeah.
that as well. That's hard to scale though. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You could plug it in through an
yeah.
API for non-mission
Hmm.
critical stuff with Sanity.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have used AI writers to like get me out of a writing rut, right? Like I'm uninspired for a title. Phrase HQ has some free tools that you can use, and like they'll provide a title or an outline for you or meta description, and sometimes it surfaces stuff that I had not thought about or titles that are really good, and I tweak them and use them, and yeah, it's good sometimes, and it's
That's
definitely on a long way.
that's actually an interesting point. Like I know a lot of people, sometimes including myself, where I can't think of an idea, but then if I see someone's crappy writing, I'll tear it apart
You can
and
fix
turn it
it,
into
yeah.
something new, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a good use of
No
AI.
more blank
It's,
page panic. It's
yeah,
AI page
yeah.
panic now.
And I agree. Written AI based upon AI content is kind of scary. It's kind of like the whole Star Wars component, right? Like first the clones were made from Jango Fett, but then after times they ran out of people to make the clones from, so they made clones from clones, which became stormtroopers, and they just got worse over time, right? So I could,
That's why they can
as the
shoot
AI, yeah, well, yes. Um,
very
oh,
inefficient
it
stuff.
can't shoot if there's a Jedi around, apparently. If it's
Yeah,
Jawas, they can shoot him pretty easily.
that
But
is true.
little plot hole. But yeah, it kind of makes sense, right, from an AI perspective. Where do you see headless going in the next 4 to 5 years.
I think the
Sounds like you've
most
done a
exciting
lot. Yeah.
thing is I have no idea,
Really?
like,
Okay.
what is
Perfect.
coming, because our clients surprise us every time. Like this
Hmm.
Dangler client, I'm really impressed. I had a chat with their, I believe it was their CMO recently, and th- he had just so many ideas. It was so lovely. Um, you can do a ton of stuff, and from what I'm seeing, like the trends that I'm seeing of how people search for us and how people use us, I think we could expect to see somewhat of a rise of omni-channel content deployment. I was having a chat with one of our developers on the product side, and well, we were workshopping a concept. Okay, we were workshopping how would we sell sanity to Martha Stewart, like the recipe maker,
Okay.
content mogul, super human. And I was thinking, well, what if you could optimize their entire social media off the back of the performance of her current articles and the new articles? And I was telling this developer, I was like in my head doing my marketer thing, just dreaming. I was like, what if for every new article we could publish automatically onto their stories using the title as like in this font and in here, and then the core image in here, using AI recognition of the image to make sure that it's like readable, and then do some reposting based on last month's um, blog post with more visits, but use a rule that doesn't resurface anything that we've reposted in the last 3 months. And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, we can do that with Sanity." And I was like, "What? How?" Um, Essentially, like everything is doable as long as there's an API. You can do anything you want.
Interesting. Interesting. So would you recommend that people definitely experiment with headless
Oh
and
yeah.
tools like Sanity, solutions like Sanity and things like that at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's fun. And as SEOs, the industry we like affiliate sites and like really quick wins. So you can take a page out of Dangler's book and make an affiliate site yourself just by pulling in from some Shopify merchants or any other providers that you'd like to work with.
Right. Yeah, that's a thing. Like, seeing a lot of comments actually right now while we're talking about AI, like who's using what AI tool and stuff like that. The thing is, it's great, but if it's not really your own site, like, uh, wouldn't it makes it a little bit harder when you're working with clients. You're not going to want to experiment on their site with
Yeah.
pulling AI without at least without letting them know. But the
But
ability to
imagine
have
you
a
had,
site to experiment on, yes,
yeah, imagine
is
you were
priceless.
doing drop shipping, right? And
Hmm.
you are selling this product, but I don't want to go again with the iPhone. You're selling a shiny fanny pack for going to
Hmm.
festivals, right? And this product is advertised on AliExpress, on 30 different merchants, and also on like little niche sites. You could feed all of that content that someone else has written for you and automatically generate unique descriptions for your product.
Yep. Nice.
We've got
Even
the
in
EA side,
the
the
real
AI
estate
side.
world, like the first thing
Yes.
that comes to mind to me is real estate as well. Like so many different real estate. Well, there's less and less. There's less and less, I guess, U.S. based real estate sites now because most real estate sites that appear in Google are owned by the same 2 or 3 companies. But um, the ability to take what is it, MMS, the real estate feed of houses for sale and all of their information and repackage that into a little bit more of an original thing by bringing in API data from third parties that those other sites aren't
Yeah.
using. It's kind of interesting as well. So
Or if you've got a
really
career
cool.
site, you can describe, you can talk about Facebook as a company to work for in by pulling in all the many ways that Facebook talks about itself, or
Hmm.
the way that other career sites talk about Facebook.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, at what point do you suggest someone look into a headless CMS solution? Even, I mean, if they're happy with what they have, or if they're getting, I mean, would you suggest this for someone that's a smaller e-commerce company, or someone that's growing, enterprise, mid-level? what are your suggestions on that end?
So I think any e-commerce merchant can probably benefit from using a headless solution, just because you've got more and more, because of the way that the whole ecosystem is evolving, right? You've got more and more ways to surface your products across different platforms. You could, I know you can do this in Sanity. I don't know if this is common with Headless, but you could click at a picture that you have of 10 of your products and say, in this section of the picture, it's this product which links to this page. And you could easily deploy that to Instagram shopping or Pinterest shopping, um, without really that much more development or that much more content work. So definitely for most e-commerce sites, I would recommend going with a headless solution, especially if you're a direct-to-consumer site that has a big brand. So I think Nike, for example, would be like an amazing use case for it. We don't have them as a client that I know of, but we have some like similar brands. Um, Anyone can buy Nike shoes from every retailer, right? You can buy them from Walmart. I don't know if Walmart sells that. I'm not American. But you can buy them on Amazon.
Not
You can
anymore.
buy them
Yeah.
on Zalando. You can buy it anywhere. So DTC brands need to make sure that the experience that they provide on their website is not the typical e-commerce experience of title, product picture, price, description. And it's more similar to the experience that they can actually provide in a shop, right? So you go to the shop and the vibe of your specific favorite brand is going to be, going back to Apple. You go to an Apple store and it feels sleek and it's organized, and you've got your areas of products on the sides of the room that almost look like the navigation from their website, right? And the experience that you get from the website, the experience you get from the shop, they are communicating the same brand values of design and excellence. But if you went on the Prada e-commerce, you're not gonna get the experience of going to a Prada shop, right? So if you go
Oh
to
yeah.
Chanel or to any high-end boutiques, you're gonna be like welcomed, and it's gonna have a specific smell, and it's gonna be playing calming music, and it's gonna be absolutely gorgeous and stunning. And you have these some people, I've seen this on TikTok, I don't buy in these places, but some people have relationships with the shoppers, the shop assistants that are on the store, and they know like, oh, we've got this bag that I know you're gonna love because it's based on the three last purchases you made. We know you, we love you. um as a D2C brand, if you want to conserve the uniqueness of your brand and you want to sell direct, because direct is where you're going to find your biggest margins and you're going to be able to own your audience and the audience data, you need to provide something that your competitors can't, which is the brand experience. Which is why, yeah, most e-commerce websites can benefit from it, especially lifestyle type of e-commerce. Um, Definitely anything D2C. And then most publishers should probably actually think really long and hard about going headless. I remember when I was at RBA, the publisher that I mentioned earlier on today's session, um, Pinterest was starting to do Pinterest shopping and product tagging and so on. And I wanted to deploy that for one of our lifestyle and home decor brands. Um, but it took such a tremendous amount of development effort that even if we had exceeded our traffic forecast by tenfold, it was not going to deliver ROI, right?
Mm.
But if it's already baked into your content structure, you can deploy that content anywhere, omni-channel, and get all the ROI that you could possibly like get from the content that you've already invested in. So it's essentially like by being clever, you're just getting profit instead of having to throw more money at it. And I think that's a very smart way to go.
I have one more question for you about headless and SEO, and we have some questions in the comments about it. How important is JavaScript site optimization knowledge when working with a headless CMS solution, specifically the ability to tell between what's server side and client side from a rendering perspective? I I'll let you go, and then I'll tell you
All
a
right.
little bit about my story.
I think you don't need to be a developer, but you definitely need to be able to debug JavaScript issues when it comes to technical SEO, or have someone in your team who can do it, and put some measures in place to safeguard the integrity of your SEO efforts and not let it like be eroded by a JavaScript change here and there. Um, so quality assurance and someone on the team who knows JavaScript SEO. But no, you don't need to be a developer to do JavaScript. That's not right. Yeah.
There's a really nice tool that Onely has. It's called What Would JavaScript Do, right? And I think there's a number of tools out there, but you basically look at the rendered versus non-rendered, Java versus non-Java component of the page.
Hmm.
And it was really useful for me for working on one of my first Gatsby oriented projects because of the difference on the client side versus the server side from a rendering perspective. And it was actually where a lot of the inconsistencies were being picked up, because basically everything from a crawl or whatever was happening on the server side, but then on the client side, we're seeing something completely different that Google was picking up, right? So Google was
Yeah.
picking that up and reporting it within Search Console, whereas all of our crawlers were not picking it up at all. So it was like, oh, Search Console is reporting this, yeah, crawler is reporting that. Of course, you can adjust your crawlers afterwards to make sure that they're picking it up accordingly. But it became incredibly important, just like with updating and identifying some issues with the canonical rewriting and stuff like that on once it hit the client side component to it. So any tools that compare client side versus server side, it's definitely going to be a must in the
Yeah.
headless world.
Yeah. And like make a point to audit for those issues, to look for those
Yes.
issues on a regular basis.
Yes. It's been a pleasure having you today, Lydia. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to headless, understanding it more. I think we can definitely work on an introduction to headless SEO out of
Yay.
what we talked about today on the call, and even maybe put together that checklist that we had talked about beforehand.
That would
Where
be
can
really
everyone
cool.
find? Yeah, where can everyone find you online?
So I'm quite active on Twitter at Lidia Infante M. That's actually my handle everywhere else. And sometimes I write stuff on my own website, which is lydia-infante.com.
Which ranks number one for SEO newsletter?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's a really good
So,
article. What can I say?
yeah, awesome. So I'm going to drop your Twitter handle in here,
Thank you.
as well as you have a link tree, right? Yeah, I'll put
Yeah.
your link tree in here. That way everyone can check out, find you wherever you are. Thank you again for sharing your experience, your insights, everything that you've learned in your 10 years, your decade in digital marketing and SEO, and especially coming from a background at big commerce as well, because I'm very familiar with the way that big commerce works from a rendering perspective sometimes. So
Oh,
it's like once you get introduced to that whole world of you just know what to look for, right? Like secondhand. So it's kind of awesome, and especially with e-commerce. Is there anything you'd like to share before we sign off for today? Because we're almost the hour mark.
every Thursday I share the best content created by women in the industry on my Twitter, with the hashtag SEO Women. And in fact, a lot of women from the Search Engine Journal, Author Rooster, feature there regularly. So check it out.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share this SEO newsletter ranking as well, which is kind of cool. So if you'd like to check out Lydia's site, just go to Google, search for SEO newsletter, and you should find her in the number one position. So we can
Feature
help you click through
snippets
there.
sometimes.
Yeah, feature sometimes that right. So,
Yeah.
sometimes maybe a little bit less now than previously, but
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody that tuned in today to watch live, and thank you to all of our listeners. just to let you know, we will be following up with the audio version of this. Next week, we'll drop that in our SEJ Show podcast stream on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And also, Lidia and Sanity are going to be sending over a URL so you can try out, give Sanity Headless CMS a spin with a SEJ specific landing page for all of your for a little presence for tuning in today. So thank you so much, Lidia. Just to let everyone know, we'll be wrapping this up on the blog. So we'll have a transcript of a lot of the discussion today around headless CMSs and SEO. And I wish you a great rest of your, what time is it? You're in Manchester, right? So
It's 9
it's getting
p.m.
pretty late, isn't it? I know, it's not too bad.
Oh, well, I have a meeting to join in a minute. So.
Oh, okay, perfect. So we kept you up. You're ready for your meeting? And,
yeah, I am. I'm pumped.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. And again, thanks to everyone who could tune in today for today's episode of the SEJ Show with Lidia Infante, all about headless CMS. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.